So, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth.
Luke, thanks for being on.
Yeah, good to be here.
You have a tough act to follow with your lovely and intelligent and engaging wife.
I'm sure she did great.
I'm not selling you short. I always enjoy my conversations with you. The reason I wanted to talk to you, they'll know by the title of the video, is because I don't know anybody else as interested in Jordan Peterson as you. You win first place. Everything from the guy's mind to his meteoric rise in public culture to like even what he's doing now. There's enough there to just take on 3 or 4 podcasts.
Yeah.
But in your case, you're like a bit of a byproduct from him. So the first question is, why did he hit your radar? And then as a result, what was like the bigger impact on your life in that regard? Not necessarily flying like an evangelical Christian flag.
No, not at all.
And he pierced the armor. So I'm just interested in how that all happened.
My interest in Jordan Peterson began when I was working for a company called Redline. Basically, I traveled from dealership to dealership, and the nicest thing about it was that there was a lot of flexibility. I read a lot of books. I would listen to podcasts sometimes. I think I started to listen to Joe Rogan a little bit semi-seriously.
Oh, he was on?
Yeah, I think he was on an episode, and it showed me some highlights of him.
Oh, yeah,
and some of the things that he said I thought made a pretty good amount of sense. So I started looking into him a little bit. What struck me about him was that he kind of followed his own advice. I ended up reading his book.
The first one?
Yeah, the first book,
Yeah.
12 Rules for Life. I mean, the only thing I haven't read left is Petting a Cat, and I got the idea.
Like his conclusion.
I own 5 cats, so I don't really think I need the chapter. I think what got me was that this guy is obsessed with lobsters.
Yeah, because he had
and weird
memed
stuff.
himself. By the time you on-ramped, he was a meme.
He was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, his book had already sold like over 1 million copies or something, and Joe Rogan, who I had a decent amount of respect for because he just seemed to shoot people straight, and he just had honest conversations with people.
Right.
Take that as you will.
I agree, totally. That's what he does best. He's curious and he has honest.
He shows faults and all, and he started the game. But the thing about Jordan that really got me was I started listening to a lot of his lectures. It was life advice, but from like a well-meaning father. I had a good father. My dad was a pastor, and he was a workaholic because my grandfather set this precedent where you just work all day. I remember very well my grandfather waking up at like 6:30 in the morning, and for some reason I was up, and I remember watching him walk out to the farm. I know that my dad like worked to the bone for him like all through growing up, and he didn't want to be in the horse business, and he felt the call at a fairly early age and went to seminary and became a pastor.
Because this really does set you up in an interesting way to find Jordan Peterson appealing, because I have noticed that young men with some kind of gap, most of the time it is fatherlessness, it wasn't for you, but I've noticed there's some sort of gap in wise, intelligent, masculine organization of life or something like that. Like that would be the thesis statement of his book, in a sense.
Yeah, I had a strong desire for academic intelligence. Like, one of my favorite shows during that time was watching House. He was nothing of any kind of role model that anybody should follow, really. But I liked that he was so witty and smart, and he knew what he believed.
He was a straight shooter.
And he was a straight shooter.
Right.
So, like, and my dad is very intellectual. He is a smart man. It's just that, most of the time whenever I would speak, if I heard him speaking on these things, it was to the congregation. When you move away, you're not around your father as much. Like, you try to fill those gaps. Like, the first gap that I tried filling with was Ravi Zacharias.
Right.
He was the only person that I really listened to for a long time.
Yeah.
And
a powerful mind.
Yeah.
Like a world-class mind, for sure.
His fall from grace really hit me hard.
Me too, and everybody has a moral bank account, and I don't think it takes from his intellectual pursuits, and I personally, just stating what I think, I also don't think because a man is faulty means that his entire banquet of work is nullified. I don't think that's true. In fact, baked into the cake of what we believe is that these broken vessels are exactly who he uses. So I would advise people even now to read Ravi because he's a really brilliant philosopher. He makes the complicated clear, and I think that's a gift that a lot of intellectuals and a lot of academics don't have, and I think that was really...
The problem now with listening to him is that you have to go in knowing that he was a bit of a hypocrite.
Well, you can include me in that camp.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you know
I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
But that's very, very tough for people to get over because when somebody's in the public eye,
I think that's true.
There's this pedestal that we put everybody on, and once you don't meet the standards, you idealize somebody enough that you're just going to not want to listen to them.
I think you're right.
And I hate that he died before he could face any of these mistakes.
I agree with everything you said. I just want to make a case for this because it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. We live in a disposable society, and we do that with people too. And I just personally don't find validity for that in the gospel. I know that's very trendy to like somebody falls from grace, and he certainly did, and I'm not making any excuses for that. But I'm a moral bank account guy. That's just where I come down. If you fall, that's not the entirety of you. It doesn't mean you whitewash it or erase it or whitewash the tombs. I don't think that's good either.
I know that's a personal thing for me. And I guess like if I was going to dismiss him so readily, then I guess I should just never read anything about David ever, look of the Bible ever again.
Or so many people.
Or so many.
Like so many great men. I do actually have political respect for John F. Kennedy, but this cat was an immoral MLK, right? A world-class mind, revolutionary. As far as his marriage, it's all been proven. And this is true of the founders. This is true of so many great people. You got the bitter and the sweet thing. I know we're rabbit trailing here, but it's such an interesting thing. We're such purists today. Yeah. And I am too. I'm throwing myself with the condemned before the firing squad goes here, but I'm just saying, God help us if our grandchildren are as judgmental of us as we are of the generations that we've just followed. Like if you talk to like your average person today and they bring up some name in history, they will just rip into this person using the standard yardstick of today. You know, I'm not thrilled with that.
I have a thought on that. And the thought is that it's mainly social media. When somebody's entire life is built around socially building up like some kind of brand, whether it be yourself,
that's true.
Then the first thing that people do is look for something to knock that guy down a peg.
So in other words, because they set up the veneer, the veneer is always good, as opposed to maybe Rogan's approach, which is he shows you right from the jump all the ugliness. Whereas somebody like Ravi always tried to polish the penny.
He was always as polished and as
I
perfect
yield
as
that
anybody
point.
Yeah, it feels like a major deception. Growing up, when my dad would take us to places, you'd always go to these speakers, and the speakers that hit the hardest are the ones that were as plain as day.
Truthful.
That were truthful.
Rough,
that
maybe.
Every single fault. Everybody roots for the underdog, which means that if you show you're not a good person, you're relatable to everybody because nobody's really that great. I mean, unless you're a narcissistic, conceited person, and even they admit some faults when it makes them look good.
That's a very generational thing where now people, they're cynical because this like everybody's scrubbing, making everybody seem like saints. That doesn't float anymore because social media has exposed all the pockmarks of people's lives. In a way, they want that, but then in a way, they'll also destroy you for that. There's this real like Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. This generation wants you to be honest, but then when you're honest, there's no forgiveness. Like you've seen this with the woke stuff. Like they won't forgive even somebody who apologizes sincerely. There's no ability to grow right now. So like if you made a mistake 10 years ago and you say, you know, I'm not the man that I was, that should be relatable because I'm not the man I was 10 years. But people are like, oh, who cares?
I think that when you have a generation like mine that kind of grew up in the start of the social media thing, where for me, it's not really that important to me. I mean, the most social media that I get on is Reddit.
You use social media strictly for information, basically.
Well, that's what I like. But the problem is that eventually, like everybody else, I end up like, well, I like Jordan Peterson, so I go on the Jordan Peterson subreddit.
And that rabbit trail turns into something else.
Well, what I ended up doing is like I liked what he had to say so much that I decided to finally read his book, and I started really taking a real critical look. Danielle and I had problems with like me. I would have trouble just like cleaning up the dishes, cleaning up the house. I was always a messy guy. When Danielle came home, she's just mentally exhausted, which is why neither of us wants to cook.
But you were dealing with like young man and into husband transition.
Just searching. We would have conversations, and sometimes we just have the same conversations over. But for some reason, when I read Jordan Peterson's book, like the first chapter is stand up, shoulders straight. You read these titles for his rules, and you're just like, okay, how can he expand on this? It's about lobsters in the first chapter, you know.
But the thing is, he's really profound with that analogy. He says something simple, and then he follows it with something that's anything but simplistic. Would you agree with that?
The simplest things can have the most
they're often
complexities inside.
Right.
Yeah, so I started looking more into personal responsibility and what it was that I wanted to get out of life. And when COVID hit, that was like a huge wake-up call for me. I realized, oh, if this job ever fell through, I have no real marketable skills that could help me provide.
There's a sober look
for my family. Many cats. So I just took a real hard look, and my brother came to stay for like a week during the lockdown. He was working for Amazon. at the time. So he stayed for a week, and I asked him a little bit about his job. I've always loved technology. I've always loved computers. And he told me that some people could get into like software development and engineering without degrees, and some people do like boot camps, and it's not math heavy, which was the thing that scared me for some reason. And when he told me all that, I took a real critical look at what I was doing. I decided to do a little bit of self-study. I found that I kind of liked it, and I thought that it was interesting. So I started looking and trying to make a plan on, can I break into this field with no experience, no prior college degree, no anything. And I would see people in articles that did it. One of the chapters in the book is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And
it's great advice.
Yeah, I'm very much a self-deprecating person. I'm very critical of myself, and you always end up looking, especially with social media, you always end up looking at a bunch of people that are more successful than you.
Right.
And most of the time, either A, get depressed, or B, try and emulate it and fail.
That's very wise.
What I did was I just decided, screw it, I'm gonna see if I can make it without any kind of like official schooling. So every day when I came home from work, I would try and get home as early as I could and still make decent money. But then I would work part-time coding every night. And I did this for like about 6 months.
From the outside perspective, then the more applicable thing to like a larger audience would be, it's not the technical things that you did, and it's not that you became a coder, and it's not that you reinvented yourself. The thing that I find most impressive about what you did, and I do think Jordan influenced you in this way, but I think
heavily.
It took courage because, a lot of times, just even imagining your life being like very different than it is now and stuff, that's a step of courage. Then actually doing it, you were married when you did it, I think that requires a little more courage. The longer I live, the more I realize, at least until fairly recently, America actually rewards courage even if you fail. Like if you go back and look at people that have reinvented themselves, there's a lot of failure in there. There's this gumption and this risk and this like belief in yourself. I really think that of all the things that you did, I think that's the thing you should be most proud of. So circle back to Jordan, I think what he's doing, he's borrowing religious capital, but he puts it in a way that's very understandable, and he sets their sights just a little bit higher, until they start to see themselves differently, and then as a result of doing that, they take chances, much like you did, relationship chances often, or professional chances. Sometimes it's just like getting yourself in society and treating society with a little bit of respect, and then getting that respect back, and these little micro wins just add up, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, you and I both know this, but especially early when he started getting a real following of young men like yourself, he started getting reprimanded publicly.
Well, I'm the demographic. I'm the disaffected young white male that he so intensely focuses, apparently.
Obviously, you and I both know this. His critics aren't actually intellectually honest enough to even do basic research on what he's doing or saying. They're just slandering him for some reason. But to think that he would have such an impact on young men is an astonishing accomplishment and such a gift to society. Because what do you want, these young men walking around aimless and depressed? And I don't think we want that outcome. So that he's done this and then gets reprimanded for his impact. It's the most potent example of bizarro world I can really think of, because of all the people to be getting tongue lashings, this is the last guy in line. You know what you don't want? Roaming packs of disenfranchised young men, purposeless and without self-identity. Because you know what that is? Dangerous.
Well, but I think the thing that really draws him for young men in particular, and the thing that I think that he's taken and like analyzed from the Bible is this. He references it a lot, is the call to adventure. He challenges you to be better than you are, because who you are today is not who you could be. There's no reason to be satisfied with how you are right now.
He challenges you to be useful to those around you. I love that. Be a person in your society that's a net gain. I love that. It's just a very basic thing. That's his whole thing, is like make your bed and all these basic things.
Yeah. Of yourself, you can take care of others.
All he's saying is, take on responsibility when your instinct is to run from responsibility. That's another real simple but profound thing that he put his finger on, and somehow he got that to resonate, because he didn't make it sound lectury. He made it sound
practical,
adventurous, practical. This is interesting. So I joined the Air Force, and this is on piggybacking on your concept. I joined the Air Force, and I meet for the first time in my life. High school was like, maybe like 15% people that didn't look like me. And so I had like, you had like your average experience with it. But all of a sudden, half my flight from people from all over the world, all walks of life. So the whole time you go in a boot camp, you get money, right? So when you're done with boot camp, they give essentially a kid like a big fat check, right? And for all like these kids, including myself, this is like the first time coming from the socioeconomic place that somebody's giving you that big check. And again, I'm piggybacking on this. I really am. So we get this check, the guy to my right, the guy to my left, and the guy above me, all black guys. So by the end of 7 weeks, we become really tight. We had talked about everything. We had like a real human friendship. So we get these checks. We go into town. I have a bank account. So I stop at the bank. I deposit my big fat baller check in the bank. I take out a couple hundy, like anybody would, like you would. My friends, all three of them, they're about to go over to a check cashing place in town. Several $100 check, and they're about to go to a check cashing place. And I walk in for the first time in my life through a check cashing place. Never did before. I look at the sign that they have right in front of the check cashing place, and it says 35% gone to get to cash this check, Shepherd Base, Texas. I said to my friends, we're not doing this. And they're like, of course we're doing this. This is what we do with every time we get a check, this is what we do. I said, no, we're not doing this. So I immediately, like physically, I said, we're not doing this. And they're like furious with me. I go, dude, I'm not going to let you give 35% of this fat check to this check cashing place. I'm like, we're walking across the street to the bank, and you guys are all starting a checking account. I swear to you, Luke, they had no idea what I was talking about. And then it dawned on me. My dad, when I was 12, marched me into a bank. He introduced me to like Jim Bob or whatever, who he had a relationship with. Opened a bank account. He gave me a lollipop. From that day on, I had a bank account. When I got to a certain age, I opened up a credit card, all that stuff. But my dad held my hand that whole time. It wasn't me being super awesome. It was like these three friends of mine had no father. They had never done that. So my point here is none of them saw 3 weeks into the future, 4 weeks into the future. They didn't see themselves. They saw right in that moment because the way they were raised was right in that moment. Every one of these guys at this point in time, one of them is a multi-millionaire right now. And the other guy makes like 10 times as much as me a year. These guys all ended up in Hawaii.
Golly, that's awesome.
So they went from
taking 35% of their income
to seeing like the big picture. When they joined the Air Force, they started seeing themselves differently. They met new people. They experienced new things. They realized, I don't got to give my 35%. That's all they knew. Yeah. Every time they had gotten a check, they take it to this check cashing place. That's all they knew. They didn't see what you just set up there. They didn't see their future selves.
Heck, I didn't either. I still kind of live in the moment, so.
Having responsibility to your future selves. That's the point. And Jordan does this for a lot of people. He gives them what I have found in the person of Christ, which is he gives them belief in themselves, identity. And let's move on to that point. This guy is taking spiritual concepts, taking the religious edge off of them, like all academics can have the ability to do. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, repackaging them in a more palatable way to the religious cynical, and then giving them the calories anyway. Well, you could say to somebody, Jesus commands us to do this, this, and this. Or you could say it like Jordan does, which is, this is timeless wisdom that has been passed on through generations. Granted, we don't have to delve into all this. You have to like take on the uniform of religiosity.
We don't have to look at the genesis of our species.
So much so, and he does it so successfully, that the guy packs stadiums and people pay him money to buy a ticket, much like a rock and roll concert.
Yeah.
They sit for sometimes 3 to 4 hours. They listen to this guy wax poetic on Old Testament Levitical law. He brilliantly, like only he can, because his breadth and width of knowledge is really profound. And he spins this like tapestry of it all. And he makes it like useful to you. This gives you
These are the proven things throughout
This
time.
is the ancient paths.
This is hundreds of years of diluted knowledge in a single book.
So let me ask you this. How's he able to do that?
Early on in his book, he describes that he did grow up in a Christian home. But when he went to college, he said, I gave away those small-minded notions or something like that. He's since come around a little bit. The thing that he does that I was struggling to find is that even if you took away the religious or spiritual implications of the message of the Bible, there is such profound practical knowledge there that you really can't ignore it. Because if you do actually break it down, like a pastor literal job is to do. It really gives you a call for the greatest adventure and personal responsibility that you could possibly have. And I think that was the thing that drew me to him the most, because he had knowledge of the Bible and he would describe these things in a different way. Like, so he said, regardless of whether or not Cain and Abel actually exist, the implications of what that story means, somebody that is jealous and bitter with their life, and they're jealous of their fellow man, and they would be willing to kill somebody over their jealousy. The idea that God, or life in his ways, like, would punish that mode of being. Like, I have to destroy that which is good around me because what I did is not good enough, because I just half-baked my sacrifice and offering.
Right.
So he'll take things on a practical level. If
Why is that appealing? That's what I'm trying to get. Like,
somebody that's an atheist has no skin in the game. There's no reason they should follow or do or say anything about the Bible. A lot of the times you can just, even at an agnostic level, you can just say...
Do you think that he's able to make it look afresh? He's a clinical psychologist, so he's got that down. But he's also just a world-class mind. He seems to be very, very curious about the human experience and what troubles it. So he'll lift out the Cain and Abel story. He'll also lift out the great Greek fables. He'll just spin this jambalaya of a soup, really making you realize that you're part of something much bigger than yourself. You're grafted in, and that you need to humble yourself.
Like, one of the things that he says is that something that benefits with you is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. It's like, clean up your room, go to church. If you don't want to go to church, go donate your time to a nonprofit, start a nonprofit. Clean up the garbage that might be on a street that you think is an eyesore. Do something for a neighbor. Make the world that you want to inhabit. Make it. Just go make it. I want to go even into Lord of the Rings. I think about this line a lot. And when they're lost in the mines of Moria, Frodo is like, I wish the ring had never come to me. Gandalf looks over him and he says, so do all that live through these troubled times. But it's not. What's not important is that you're living in these times. It's what you do with the time that you're given.
Yes. So, everybody can paint some yarn where boo-hoo. And that's a trap that you lock from the inside. You're in a cage then. You're in a cage of your own choosing, your own making, as opposed to what Jordan is sort of setting before the young man, which is that isn't locked from the inside. Unlock it.